Hello, AP Psychology students. Welcome to Chapter 7 and our study on memory. Memory is, as I'm sure you all know, just an amazing capacity that we have as humans. Today, my objective is to teach you about how we look at memory, for example, the model of memory, and then what's called the three-stage model of memory. I normally love teaching this unit in class. I have a lot of really cool memory tests that I like to do and great demonstrations. And unfortunately, because of the situation that we're in right now, we're going to have to adapt to that. We're not going to be able to do that. But I will share with you. Normally, I have students share with someone, a partner, some things that they did over spring break, some things that they remember. And I remember this spring break. This was about 3 years ago. I had two children living in Florida. And so we went to go visit them, and I got to ride on an airboat in the Everglades. And after the airboat ride, I got to hold this lovely fella, just a wonderful little alligator with a really soft belly. It was kind of fun. I don't recommend it unless you're closely supervised, but I am not afraid of reptiles. So that just goes to show it. All right, so let's take a look at how we think about memory. Um, Memory scientists and cognitive scientists work closely together because actually what a lot of artificial intelligence is doing is trying to create a model of human memory and cognitive processing. And so, for example, the computer science department and the cognitive science department at MIT work closely together in the pursuit of both understanding human memory and decision making and problem solving, as well as trying to apply that then to computer science. So we do use a computer analogy when we talk about memory. Um, First of all, encoding. This is how we first get a memory into our brains. So it's the act of forming the memory code, which is demonstrated by the keyboard. Then we have storage, maintaining encoded memories over time. Obviously, this is a very large desktop computer. It probably holds as much as your little phone does, but nevertheless, um, we do have storage in our brains, and we maintain these encoded memories over a long period of time. And then finally, and I hope my picture's not obscuring this, but retrieval is demonstrated by the screen here. And this is just recovering information from our memory stores. So something like a computer, we get the information in, we store it, and we take it out when we need to. Now let's look at the three-stage model of memory. This was developed by Atkinson and Shiffrin. When I was in college, this is the model that I learned. However, they have added an extra component to it that I did not learn when I was in college. So if you take a look at this chart here, you have external events. That's the stimuli, right? And that goes to your sensory memory. Now, most of our memories will be auditory or visual memories. But and most of our memories come in through our auditory or visual senses. The process is then that we take that sensory information and we attend to it. So we think about important or novel information, and we encode that into what's called our working and short-term memory. Now, you probably don't remember what you were wearing the Wednesday before school was out. I don't remember what I wore then. It wasn't really important to me. Now, what I do remember, though, is people talking about on Friday, before we were let out for the release of or for preparation for distance learning. I remember people talking about, are we going to school on Monday? Do you think we'll be at school on Monday? And I remember students asking me that. Well, that was important and that was novel because, it's just not every day that you have a pandemic come around. From there, you can do some other processing of that information, and that information then goes into the long-term memory. And that is indeed what happened with my memory of people asking me if they thought we'd be at school on Monday. Now, when we need to get information back out of memory, we bring it from a long-term memory back into our working and short-term memory. So let's say the information comes from the sensory into the sensory memory. Are we going to have school on Monday? I think about that. That's really intriguing. We have a pandemic. I encode that into my long-term memory. Just now, as I was recalling this memory, I retrieved it from my long-term memory and I thought about some students who asked me if we had school on Monday. Now let's take another look at this. Um, uh, add one more thing to this. External events can go directly into long-term memory without going through the sensory memory or working short-term memory. In other words, we can encode or get into our long-term memory certain things such as time of day or location without really having to pay a lot of attention to it. So I remember students asking me if they thought we were going to have school on Monday in the classroom. I didn't really have to think about that. I didn't have to do any kind of elaborative rehearsal. It's just something I remember. Okay, now let's take a look at this example here. This is a sensory memory I might have, and I'm guessing NASCAR here. I don't know. I haven't been to a NASCAR race, but this is just kind of what I think it would look like. A lot of people with sunglasses on. I notice this guy right here. Do you notice him? He kind of looks like his teeth are barred, like he's, like mad or something like that. So I pay some attention to that because it's novel. It's maybe even a little bit threatening. He seems angry, and so that goes from my sensory memory into my working and short-term memory. Now, I think I want to remember this guy because if I cross him in the parking lot afterwards and he's still looking angry, I think I'm going to want to avoid crossing paths with him. So I take his expression, I take the hat that he has on, I take the shirt that he has on, and I put an image of this guy into my long-term memory. And then if indeed I do cross paths with him on the way out of my NASCAR race, if that's where I'm at, it will come back into my working and short-term memory and I'll go, I'm going to go walk the other direction. Okay, so that's basically how the three-stage processing model works. All right, now, normally this is a time when I like to tell a story about an airplane. This is a plane that has been hijacked by the People's Liberation Army for the liberation of the oppressed. It is a Boeing 747, and it is flying from Miami to Los Angeles when a hijacker went up to a flight attendant named Jack Swanson and asked to bring him to the pilot, Jane Randall. There, the hijacker ordered the pilot to change course for Cuba. As she looked like she was calling the Miami Air Traffic Control, she threw the radio at the hijacker, who fell backwards into the aisle, and the passengers took over from there. The plane landed in Miami a few minutes later, and the hijacker was arrested. Okay, so I've just told you a story, had a number of details, and if you could maybe just write down what you think I told you. What were the parts of the story that I told you, and how well did you do at getting all the details? Go back and listen to the story and see how well you did. So here's what normally happens with this story. I use it to illustrate encoding. In other words, how we get information into our memory. There are a couple of things that happen with encoding memories. And something that I think really surprises a lot of people as we go through this is that memories are not like photographs. They're not like films. In fact, we construct memories. Psychologist named Bartlett described this process. So we give meaning to events and we construct and create memories. And memories are actually something like Jell-O. They are not firm until after a couple of days of processing and thinking about what happened and the experiences that you had or what you heard. Now, a lot of times when I do this in class, I will have that game telephone where you tell something to someone and they tell it to somebody else and they tell it to somebody else. And some interesting things happen in this process. First of all, sometimes we just simplify a story. For example, the story I told you, sometimes it will just come down to, well, a hijacker had a gun, wanted to go to Miami, and the hijacker was arrested. Okay, so that gets the basic idea about the event that happened. And sometimes that's the memory that we really might have of that story that we heard from somebody else. Sometimes we highlight some details. Now, occasionally people will highlight the details that Jack Swanson was the flight attendant and Jane Randall was the pilot. Did any of you remember that detail? I'm curious about that. Some people completely forget about it, but others highlight it because it is different than from what we normally expect, especially when it comes to Jane Randall, the pilot, because in our experiences in this day and age, it is still true that most of our pilots are men. What a lot of us do is assimilate. We change details to fit our own knowledge or background. So oftentimes, Jack Swanson becomes the pilot and Jane Randall becomes the flight attendant. Oftentimes, the Miami or Los Angeles or Cuba or any of the hijacker becomes a terrorist. A lot of things change in this story. And so these are some common things that happen when we're constructing memories. We construct memories based off of our schema. And our schema, as we've talked about before, is our cluster of knowledge based on previous experience. Schemas are important because they help us to interpret and organize new experiences, and they lessen the burden on our thinking processes, but they can lead to false assumptions, as we've talked about before. So schema might make us assume that someone has a weapon when they don't, or that a pilot is male when it's female. So just keep that in mind as you think about your own memories, and you will think about them a lot as we go through this unit. Now, another aspect of encoding is automatic processing. This is something that is just your space, your place, and time of day. So as you can see, automatic, where you ate dinner yesterday, I ate dinner at home, my daughter made a wonderful dinner, and this unit's concepts will require effortful processing. So keep in mind, some things are automatically processed, while other things require attention and what we call elaborative rehearsal. Now, normally in class, I would do some activities that would illustrate the fact, for example, that drawing a penny front and back is a really difficult thing to do. If you haven't looked at this too closely yet, you could try doing it yourself. But the techniques for effective encoding that I'm going to talk about very quickly here to end this video are, first of all, elaborative rehearsal. Secondly, visual imagery. I'm going to post a link to the Memory Palace, and I recommend watching that and learning about how the method of loci can help you remember a great deal of information, and it's something that is used in speeches, memorizing speeches, and things like that. The self-reference effect is really effective for encoding. How does the concept relate to me? This is why I had you in our learning unit think about how the operant and classical conditioning principles related directly to you. Rehearsal and repetition are always really, really helpful, and they do help you to memorize. However, spacing and distributive practice, in other words, daily reading and review, are going to be one of the most effective things that you can do, especially in an academic coursework, is to read the pages that are assigned and review them each day. Always focus on meaning, context, and connections. It's really easy, for example, to make a flashcard and just repeat what the flashcard says, but it really doesn't do much for you in the long run as far as really digging into what the meaning of that term or the vocabulary item is. And then finally, using mnemonics can be really helpful in memory. These are acronyms, so PEMDAS is one that I've heard a lot of students talk about in the order of operations, and homes you might recognize are the Great Lakes. My time is up here. I'm going to give a few more instructions on our school page, and tomorrow we'll look at storage. Thank you.